The punch landed with brutal precision, stealing the billionaire's breath and shattering the illusion of safety in his own home. In the instant before chaos erupted, Julian Croft learned that sometimes the greatest danger comes from those you never see coming, and sometimes so does your only chance at survival. For one stunned heartbeat, the world seemed to freeze. The penthouse, with its glittering skyline backdrop, suddenly felt exposed and fragile. Julian's mind reeled as he doubled over, pain blooming in his chest where the maid's fist had struck. He barely had time to process the shock before the next threat revealed itself. Crack! A bullet punched through the glass just inches from where Julian's head had been, sending a spray of shards across the polished floor. Alarms wailed. Somewhere below, voices shouted, "Get down!" Panic surged through the room as the city's distant noise faded beneath the chaos erupting inside. The maid, Alara, whose presence he'd barely registered until now, seized his wrist with surprising strength. "No time," she hissed, her voice stripped of all deference. "Security's not safe. This way!" Julian stumbled after her, confusion and outrage drowned out by the pounding of his heart. She yanked him through a narrow service door, plunging them into the building's shadowy, high-humming corridors. The world of glass and marble vanished behind them, replaced by cold concrete and the thrum of hidden machinery. "Who are you?" Julian gasped, fighting to keep pace. Alara didn't answer, her focus unbroken. "Later. Right now you have to trust me. Someone wants you dead." As they hurried deeper into the labyrinth, Julian's mind raced. How had he, the master of every room, missed the danger lurking so close? Why had the person he'd overlooked become his only hope for survival? They ducked into a forgotten storage room, breathless and surrounded by relics of Julian's discarded luxury. For the first time, he looked beyond Alara's uniform and saw the fierce resolve in her eyes. He had questions, urgent, desperate ones, but as the adrenaline faded, he realized the answers would change everything he thought he knew about loyalty, power, and the people he'd always taken for granted. Now, as the echoes of chaos faded behind the thick storage room door, Julian braced himself for the truth. The story of how a maid became his unlikely savior was only beginning. Julian's breath came in shallow bursts, the adrenaline still coursing through his veins as he pressed his back against the cold metal shelving. Distantly, he could hear the muffled chaos above. The alarms, the pounding feet, the frantic voices. But here, in the dim light of the storage room, it was just the two of them. The billionaire and the maid who had just saved his life. He studied Alara, really seeing her for the first time. She looked nothing like the invisible help he'd always ignored. There was a steadiness in her gaze, a quiet strength that refused to waver even now. He realized she was waiting for him to speak, to demand answers, to reassert control. But for once, Julian found himself at a loss. Finally, he broke the silence. "You knew this was coming, didn't you?" Alara nodded, her expression guarded. "I had suspicions. I overheard things, saw things that didn't add up, men who didn't belong, conversations that stopped when I entered a room. I tried to warn security, but..." She shook her head. "I realized too late that they were part of the problem." Julian's jaw tightened. The betrayal stung almost as much as the punch. "So you took matters into your own hands." "I couldn't let you die," she said simply. "Not like that. Not for someone else's greed." He searched her face, trying to make sense of it. "Why risk everything for me?" "You don't even know me." A shadow flickered in her eyes. "Because I do know what it's like to lose everything to people who think they're untouchable. My father, he built a small company from nothing. It was taken from him, destroyed by someone who wanted more. We lost our home, our family. I lost him." Julian felt the weight of her words. For the first time, the lines between billionaire and maid blurred, replaced by a shared understanding of loss, of betrayal, of the high cost of power. He exhaled slowly, the anger and confusion giving way to something else, something like respect. "Who sent them?" he asked, his voice low. Alara's answer was quiet, but it carried the force of a storm. "Marcus Thorne." The name sent a chill through Julian, his rival, the man he'd been preparing to outmaneuver for months. Now, the pieces clicked into place. The timing, the method, the ruthlessness. Thorne hadn't just come for his business. He'd come for his life. Julian straightened, resolve hardening in his chest. "We're not going to let him win." Alara met his gaze, and for the first time, there was a hint of hope in her eyes. Then we'd better move. They won't stop until they're sure you're dead. Julian nodded, the fear in his veins now tempered by a new determination. He wasn't just fighting for his own survival anymore. He was fighting for justice, for redemption, and for the people who'd been trampled by men like Thorn. As they slipped out of the storage room and into the uncertain darkness, Julian knew this was only the beginning. Julian Croft was a man who had everything, or so the world believed. His penthouse perched above the city like a glass crown, its walls reflecting the skyline in endless perfect symmetry. Every detail of his domain was curated. Marble floors polished to a mirror shine, art worth millions, and a staff so discreet they might as well have been ghosts. On this particular evening, the city below buzzed with anticipation. Financial news tickers ran his name in bold, breathless headlines. Julian Croft was about to announce a deal that would cement his legacy, a move so daring the world's markets would tremble. He stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, his sharp reflection staring back, tie perfectly knotted, hair untouched by the city's humidity. He relished the hush before the storm. His assistants moved quietly in the background, checking earpieces, prepping the live broadcast. Security men in crisp suits stood by the doors, eyes scanning for threats that had never breached these walls, until now. Julian's gaze swept the room, barely noticing the maid as she glided along the glass with a cloth in hand. Alara. She had started only a few weeks ago, so quiet he'd almost forgotten her name. She kept to herself, never speaking unless spoken to, her eyes always lowered. If he'd ever bothered to look closer, he might have seen the intelligence flickering behind her calm exterior. But tonight, Julian's mind was elsewhere, on the numbers, the headlines, the power that pulsed at his fingertips. He rehearsed his speech in his head, each word calculated to inspire awe and fear in equal measure. Alara moved with practiced grace, her motions efficient and unhurried. She paused for a moment, glancing at the reflection of the room in the glass. Her eyes darted to the shadows where two men in maintenance uniforms lingered longer than necessary, their hands fiddling with a panel that had been serviced just days ago. She watched, unnoticed, as they exchanged a look and slipped something small into the vent. A chill crept up her spine. She had learned to trust her instincts, owned by years of surviving in places where danger wore many faces. Tonight, those instincts screamed at her to pay attention. Julian checked his watch. 2 minutes until the broadcast. He straightened his jacket, cleared his throat, and stepped toward the balcony, the city's heartbeat pulsing beneath his feet. The staff melted away, leaving only Alara in the periphery, her gaze fixed on the glass. The moment stretched, suspended between anticipation and dread. Then, without warning, Alara's voice sliced through the silence. "Sir," he turned, irritation flashing in his eyes. "Not now." But she was already moving. In one swift motion, she dropped her cloth, crossed the polished floor, and drove her fist into his stomach. The punch landed with brutal precision, stealing the billionaire's breath and shattering the illusion of safety in his own home. In the instant before chaos erupted, Julian Croft learned that sometimes the greatest danger comes from those you never see coming, and sometimes so does your only chance at survival. For one stunned heartbeat, the world seemed to freeze. The penthouse, with its glittering skyline backdrop, suddenly felt exposed and fragile. Julian's mind reeled as he doubled over, pain blooming in his chest where the maid's fist had struck. He barely had time to process the shock before the next threat revealed itself. Crack! A bullet punched through the glass just inches from where Julian's head had been, sending a spray of shards across the polished floor. Alarms wailed. Somewhere below, voices shouted, "Get down!" Panic surged through the room as the city's distant noise faded beneath the chaos erupting inside. The maid, Alara, whose presence he'd barely registered until now, seized his wrist with surprising strength. "No time," she hissed, her voice stripped of all deference. "Security's not safe. This way." Julian stumbled after her, confusion and outrage drowned out by the pounding of his heart. She yanked him through a narrow service door, plunging them into the building's shadowy, humming corridors. The world of glass and marble vanished behind them, replaced by cold concrete and the thrum of hidden machinery. "Who are you?" Julian gasped, fighting to keep pace. Alara didn't answer, her focus unbroken. Later. Right now, you have to trust me. Someone wants you dead. As they hurried deeper into the labyrinth, Julian's mind raced. How had he, the master of every room, missed the danger lurking so close? Why had the person he'd overlooked become his only hope for survival? They ducked into a forgotten storage room, breathless and surrounded by relics of Julian's discarded luxury. For the first time, he looked beyond Alara's uniform and saw the fierce resolve in her eyes. He had questions, urgent, desperate ones, but as the adrenaline faded, he realized the answers would change everything he thought he knew about loyalty, power, and the people he'd always taken for granted. Julian's world had been reduced to the rough grip of Alara's hand and the echoing chaos they'd left behind. The pristine corridors of his penthouse were now a memory, replaced by the stark humming veins of the building's service passages. The air was thick with the scent of dust and old machinery, a world away from the luxury he'd always known. Alara moved with a purpose that unsettled Julian. He was used to being the one in command, the one others followed. Now, he was the one being led, stumbling over unseen obstacles as she navigated the maze of back hallways with practiced ease. They rounded a corner and ducked into a narrow stairwell. Alara pressed a finger to her lips, listening. Footsteps thundered in the distance, voices barking orders, security, or something far worse. Julian's mind raced. How had his fortress become a hunting ground? How had he, with all his power, become prey? Alara's eyes flicked to him. Keep your head down. They'll be looking for you, maybe even for me. He nodded, swallowing his questions. Every instinct screamed for answers, but the urgency in her voice kept him silent. She led him down 2 flights, pausing only when the sounds above faded into a tense silence. Julian pressed his back to the wall, trying to steady his breathing. You need to explain, he whispered. What just happened back there? Alara's jaw tightened. Assassination attempt. The men in the maintenance uniforms. They weren't staff. I saw them plant something in the vent. I overheard them talking about the glare on the balcony. I didn't know if it was real, but I couldn't take the chance. Julian stared at her, the reality sinking in. You punched me. You saved me. She nodded, her expression unflinching. It was the only way to move you fast enough. I'm sorry for the pain, but if I'd hesitated... A fresh wave of adrenaline surged through him. Who are you, really? Alara hesitated for the first time, her eyes shadowed. Just someone who's seen what happens when powerful men make enemies, someone who's learned to pay attention. A crash echoed above them. Someone searching, maybe even following. Alara grabbed Julian's arm again, pulling him deeper into the building's underbelly. They passed pipes hissing with steam, electrical boxes humming with unseen energy. The farther they went, the more Julian realized how little he knew about the world beneath his feet. Finally, Alara stopped at a heavy steel door, glancing both ways before producing a small key from her pocket. She unlocked it, ushering Julian into a cramped, dimly lit storage room. The door closed with a dull thud, muffling the chaos beyond. Julian slumped onto an overturned crate, his mind spinning. Why would anyone want me dead? Who sent them? Alara crouched in front of him, her gaze steady. You're not short on enemies, Mr. Croft, but I recognized one of the men from somewhere else, a place I never wanted to see again. I think this goes deeper than business. I think it's personal. Julian's anger flared. You should have told me sooner. She shook her head. Would you have listened? Or would you have had me fired for making trouble? He had no answer to that. The truth stung more than the bullet ever could. A tense silence settled between them, broken only by the distant hum of the building. Alara finally spoke, her voice softer. I know you don't trust me, but right now, I'm the only one who's not trying to kill you. We need to stick together. Julian looked at her, really looked, and saw the determination in her eyes. For the first time, he realized that survival depended not on his wealth, but on the courage of someone he'd always overlooked. He nodded, the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. What do we do now? Alara straightened, resolve hardening her features. Now we find out who's hunting you, and why. But first, we need to get out of this building alive. As they prepared to move again, Julian felt the world shift beneath his feet. Everything he thought he knew about safety, loyalty, and power was unraveling, and the only person he could trust was the maid who had just punched him to save his life. The storage room door clicked softly shut behind them, sealing Julian and Alara in a pocket of uneasy calm. The air was thick with the scent of old cardboard and cleaning chemicals, a stark contrast to the sterile luxury Julian had always known. He sat on the edge of a battered crate, his mind racing with questions that refused to quiet. Alara moved quickly, scanning the room for anything useful. A flashlight, a discarded maintenance jacket, maybe even a forgotten phone. She paused, her hand resting on the handle of a mop, and looked back at Julian. "Are you ready to move?" she asked, her voice low but urgent. Julian hesitated, glancing at the door as if expecting it to burst open at any moment. Was he ready? He'd spent his life controlling every variable, but now he was at the mercy of a world he'd never bothered to see. He caught himself wondering, if you were in his shoes, would you trust the person who just punched you? Or would you still be looking for a way to take back control? He nodded, forcing composure into his voice. "Let's go." They slipped out into the dimly lit corridor, footsteps echoing on the linoleum. Alara led the way, every movement purposeful. She seemed to know the building's secret arteries, the maintenance stairs, the service elevator, the hidden alcoves where no security camera could reach. Julian followed, his senses sharpened by fear and adrenaline. As they descended a narrow stairwell, the sounds of chaos filtered down from above. Shouts, the distant clang of doors, and somewhere the unmistakable bark of a security radio. Was it help? Or had the enemy already infiltrated every level of his fortress? Alara paused at a landing, pressing her ear to the door. She motioned Julian to stay back, her eyes scanning the shadows. "We need to get to the sub-basement. There's an old delivery entrance. If we're lucky..." It's still unguarded. Julian's mind raced. "Why do you know all this?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she cracked the door open, peering out into the gloom. When you're invisible, you learn to see everything. The cracks in the system, the places people forget. Her words lingered in Julian's mind. How much had he missed by never looking beyond the surface? How many stories, secrets, and dangers lived just out of sight, waiting for someone to notice? They darted across a deserted loading bay, hearts pounding. Julian's expensive shoes slipped on the greasy floor, and he caught himself on a stack of crates. Alara reached out, steadying him with a firm grip. "Careful, we can't afford mistakes." A sudden shout echoed from the stairwell behind them. Someone had found their trail. Alara's eyes flashed with determination. "Go! Down that hallway! Now!" They sprinted, Julian's breath burning in his lungs. The chase was on. Every instinct screamed at him to stop, to fight, to demand answers. But survival demanded trust. For the first time, he realized that his fate depended on the courage and cunning of someone he'd always overlooked. They reached the sub-basement, plunging into darkness. Alara flicked on her flashlight, illuminating a narrow corridor lined with pipes and dust. "Almost there," she whispered. Julian's thoughts spun. Who was after him, really? Was it just business, or something deeper? And most importantly, could he ever go back to the life he'd known? As they crept toward the delivery entrance, Julian couldn't help but wonder, if your world shattered in an instant, who would you trust to guide you through the dark? What secrets would you discover about yourself and about the people you'd ignored? A heavy clang rang out behind them. Footsteps, closer now. Alara grabbed his hand, pulling him toward a battered metal door at the end of the hall. "Ready?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Julian nodded, heart pounding. He had no idea what waited beyond that door, but he knew this. The world he'd built was gone, and the only way forward was through the unknown. As Alara pushed the door open, the night air rushed in, cold and bracing. For a brief moment, Julian looked back at the darkness behind them, then stepped into the uncertain freedom beyond. What would you do if everything you trusted was suddenly ripped away? Would you cling to the past, or follow the one person bold enough to save you? Tell us your thoughts below. The city's cold night air stung Julian's face as he and Alara slipped into the alley behind the building. The door clanged shut, muffling the shouts and chaos they'd left behind. Julian pressed his back to the rough brick wall, chest heaving, while Alara scanned the shadows for movement. For the first time since the nightmare began, they were truly alone. The silence was thick with questions. Julian broke it first, voice ragged. Who are you, really? He searched Alara's face for answers, for any sign that this was all some elaborate trick. Alara hesitated, her eyes darting to the street before settling on him. You want the truth? I'll give it to you, but you're not going to like it. She drew a shaky breath, her hands trembling just slightly before she clenched them into fists. My name is Alara Vance. My father was Thomas Vance. Maybe you've heard of him. A small tech entrepreneur, the kind of man who believed in building things that lasted. He lost everything when your rival, Marcus Thorne, crushed his company in a hostile takeover. My family lost our home, our savings, our future. My father lost his will to fight, and then he lost his life. Julian's mind reeled. He remembered the Vance acquisition, just another line on a balance sheet, another victory for the market. But he'd never considered the human cost. How many lives had he changed without even knowing their names? How many stories ran beneath the surface of his success? Alara continued, her voice steady now. After my father died, I vowed I'd find a way to make things right. I took this job because I knew Thorne was circling you, just like he did my dad. I thought maybe, just maybe, I could warn you before it was too late. Julian's throat tightened. You risked everything to save me. Why? She met his gaze, eyes fierce. Because I know what it's like to watch someone you love destroyed by greed. And because nobody deserves to be murdered for business. A heavy silence settled between them. Julian felt the weight of her words settle on his shoulders, heavier than any deal he'd ever brokered. He looked away, shame burning in his cheeks. I never knew. I never even thought to ask who got hurt along the way. Alara's voice softened. Most people don't, but you have a choice now. What will you do with it? Julian's mind spun with questions. Is redemption possible for someone who's built their empire on other people's pain? Can one act of courage spark real change? Or is it already too late? A sudden noise at the mouth of the alley snapped them both to attention. Headlights swept across the bricks and a car slowed, engine idling. Alara tensed, reaching for Julian's arm. We need to move. Thorne's people won't stop until they're sure you're dead. But you have to decide, Julian. Are you running just to save yourself, or are you finally ready to fight for something bigger? As they melted into the shadows, Julian knew this was the moment that would define him, not just as a billionaire, but as a human being. If you were Julian, would you seek redemption or revenge? Is it ever too late to change your legacy? The city's back streets felt like a different world, far from the penthouse towers and boardrooms Julian once ruled. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Every passing car a potential enemy. Julian and Alara moved quickly, ducking through alleys and weaving between dumpsters, their breath visible in the chill night air. Julian's mind was a storm of questions and regrets. How had it come to this? Hunted like prey, relying on the instincts of a woman he'd barely noticed until tonight. He glanced at Alara, her eyes sharp and alert, scanning every corner as if she'd spent her whole life on the run. A shout echoed behind them. Flashlights bobbed in the darkness, voices barking orders. Thorne's men were closing in. Alara grabbed Julian's hand, pulling him into a narrow gap between two buildings. Stay low! Don't make a sound, she whispered. They pressed themselves against the cold brick, heartbeats thundering in their ears. The footsteps grew louder, then paused just feet away. Julian held his breath, wondering. If you were in his place, would you trust your fate to a stranger? Or would you risk everything to break free on your own? The men moved on, their voices fading. Alara exhaled softly, relief flickering across her face. We need to keep moving. They'll double back. Julian nodded, his trust in her growing with every narrow escape. They slipped through a broken fence into a forgotten courtyard, the moonlight casting long shadows on the cracked pavement. Why are you helping me? Julian asked quietly, the question lingering between them. You could have walked away. You could have let them finish what they started. Alara stopped, turning to face him. Because I know what it's like to be hunted. To lose everything because someone else decided your life didn't matter. She looked him in the eye. But you're not the only one running tonight. Thorne's men will come after me too. We're in this together, whether you like it or not. Julian felt a strange comfort in her words. He'd always believed power meant standing alone, but now he wondered, Could survival depend on the bonds you forged in the darkest moments? They navigated the labyrinth of alleys, slipping through shadows and sidestepping danger at every turn. At one point, a security car cruised by, its spotlight sweeping dangerously close. Alara pressed Julian against a wall, her hand steady on his chest until the threat passed. As they moved, fragments of Alara's past surfaced. A memory of her father's gentle voice, the night they lost their home, the vow she'd made to seek justice. Julian listened, realizing how little he understood about the people who moved through his world unseen. At last, they found temporary refuge behind a locked service door. Alara picked the lock with practiced ease, ushering Julian inside. The space was cramped and dark, filled with the hum of machinery and the scent of oil and dust. Julian slumped to the floor, exhaustion and fear catching up with him. Alara crouched beside him, her face illuminated by the faint glow of her phone. "We can't stay here long," she said. "They'll be searching every inch of this city." Julian looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time. "What do we do now?" Alara's eyes narrowed with determination. "Now, we find allies, people who know the truth about Thorn, people who can help us fight back. But you need to decide, Julian. Are you ready to risk everything for justice, or will you run and let him win?" The question hung in the air, daring Julian and every reader to consider. When the world turns against you, do you hide, or do you fight for what's right? As dawn crept over the city, Julian knew his answer would change everything. Not just for himself, but for everyone Thorn had ever hurt. The first light of dawn painted the city in pale gold as Julian and Alara emerged from their temporary hiding place. The world seemed quieter now, but beneath the surface, danger still simmered. Every street corner, every passing car felt like a potential threat. Julian's nerves were raw, his mind replaying the events of the night in a relentless loop. Alara led the way through the waking city, her steps confident and purposeful. She moved with the certainty of someone who had spent years navigating the spaces others ignored. Julian followed, acutely aware of how much he depended on her. Was this what trust felt like? Letting go of control and putting your life in someone else's hands? They ducked into a small cafe just as it opened, blending in with the early morning crowd. Alara ordered 2 coffees, her eyes never leaving the window. Julian watched her, wondering how she managed to stay so calm. If you were in his place, would you be able to keep your composure? Or would fear get the better of you? As they sat in a secluded booth, Alara pulled out her phone and tapped out a message. "I know someone who can help us," she said quietly. "An old friend of my father's. A journalist who's been trying to bring Thorn down for years. If anyone can help us expose him, it's her." Julian nodded, relief mingling with anxiety. "And you trust her?" Alara's gaze was steady. "I have to. We're out of options." Minutes later, a woman in her 40s slipped into the booth beside them. She introduced herself as Mara Chen, sharp-eyed, quick-witted, and clearly used to operating in the shadows. After a brief, tense exchange, Mara agreed to help on one condition. "You give me the truth, all of it, no more secrets." Julian hesitated, but Alara nodded. "Deal." What followed was a whirlwind of planning and whispered strategy. Mara had contacts, people willing to risk everything to bring Thorn's crimes to light. She promised to arrange a safe house and begin gathering evidence, but warned them, "You're not safe yet. Thorn's reach is long and he has eyes everywhere." As they prepared to leave, Julian found himself questioning everything he thought he knew about loyalty and power. If your survival depended on strangers, would you be able to trust them? How far would you go to protect the truth? The trio slipped out the back of the cafe, blending into the morning crowd. Every step was a risk, every glance over the shoulder a reminder of the danger closing in. Julian's old life felt impossibly distant, replaced by a new reality where every decision could mean life or death. That night, huddled in the shadows of Mara's safe house, Julian looked at Alara and Mara, 2 women who had risked everything for justice. He realized that true strength wasn't about wealth or influence, but about the courage to do what was right, even when the odds were against you. As sleep finally claimed him, Julian wondered, when the moment comes to stand up for what you believe in, will you have the courage to act, or will you let fear decide your fate? If you were Julian, would you risk your life to expose the truth? Who would you trust in a world where everyone seems to have something to hide? Share your thoughts below. Night pressed heavy against the windows of Mara's safe house, but inside, a new energy pulsed, one that Julian hadn't felt in days. The fear hadn't vanished, but it had been replaced by something sharper. Resolve. Maps, photos, and hastily scribbled notes littered the kitchen table. Mara's contacts had come through with leads on Thorne's operations, shell companies, bribed officials, hidden accounts. Alara worked alongside Mara, piecing together the evidence with a focus that impressed even the seasoned journalist. Julian leaned over the table, tracing a line between two addresses. If we can prove Thorne's been laundering money through these fronts, we can bring him down. But we need hard evidence, something undeniable. Mara nodded. One of my sources works at the bank Thorne uses. She's scared, but she might talk if she knows you'll protect her. Alara's voice was calm, but her eyes burned with determination. We'll protect her. No one else gets hurt because of him. Julian felt a surge of admiration, and something more. He realized that courage wasn't about never being afraid, but about acting in spite of it. If you were in his shoes, would you risk your reputation, your safety, everything you've ever known to do what's right? The plan was risky. Mara would arrange a meeting with the whistleblower, while Julian and Alara would gather surveillance at one of Thorne's warehouses. Every step was a gamble. Every hour that passed, another chance for Thorne's men to find them. As they prepared for the night's work, Julian paused. "Why are you both willing to risk so much for this?" Mara shrugged. "Someone has to stand up to men like Thorne. I've seen too many good people ruined by his greed. I won't let him destroy anyone else." Alara met Julian's gaze. "This isn't just about revenge. It's about justice. For my father. For everyone. Thorne's hurt, and maybe for you too." Julian let her words settle in his heart. For the first time, he felt like he was part of something bigger than himself. The night unfolded in a series of tense moments. Waiting in the shadows outside the warehouse, holding their breath as Thorne's men passed by, snapping photos of illicit shipments and coded ledgers. Every click of the camera was a risk, every whispered plan a thread tying them closer together. When they finally regrouped at the safe house, Mara's phone buzzed with a coded message. The whistleblower was ready to talk. Julian looked at Alara, hope and anxiety warring in his chest. This could be it, the evidence we need. Alara squeezed his hand, her confidence steadying him. "Then let's finish what we started." As dawn crept over the city, a new question burned in Julian's mind. When you're given a chance to make things right, will you seize it or let fear hold you back? The city buzzed with anticipation as the sun climbed higher, casting sharp light over a world on the edge of change. Julian, Alara, and Mara stood together behind the heavy curtains of a packed press room, the air electric with expectation and nerves. Outside, cameras flashed, reporters jostled for position, and the world waited for a story that would shake the foundations of power. Julian's hands trembled, not with fear, but with the weight of what was about to unfold. For the first time in his life, he wasn't stepping into the spotlight to announce a victory for himself, but to expose a truth that could bring justice to countless others. Mara squeezed his shoulder. "Remember, this is bigger than you. This is for everyone Thorne has ever hurt. For Alara's father. For every family ruined by greed." Alara nodded, her eyes shining with courage. "We're with you. No matter what happens, you're not alone." The doors opened, and the trio stepped onto the stage. The room erupted in a frenzy of questions and camera flashes. Julian raised a hand for silence, his voice steady as he began. "Thank you all for coming. Today, I am not here as a businessman, but as a witness. I have evidence, gathered with the help of brave individuals, that Marcus Thorne has orchestrated a campaign of fraud, violence, and intimidation to destroy his rivals and enrich himself at the expense of countless lives." He gestured to Mara, who distributed copies of documents, photos, and audio recordings to the press. Screens behind them lit up with proof. Bank transfers, coded messages, even a confession from Thorne's own whistleblower, her voice trembling but resolute. Reporters gasped, questions flew, and the world watched as the truth shattered the illusion of untouchable power. Thorne's lawyers tried to shout Julian down, but the evidence was undeniable. Law enforcement officers entered the room, placing Thorne's associates under arrest as the cameras rolled. Alara stood tall beside Julian, her presence a silent testament to resilience and justice. For the first time, the world saw her not as a maid, but as a hero. Julian's closing words rang out. I built my life on the idea that winning was everything. But real victory is using your power to protect, not destroy. Today, I choose to stand with those who have been silenced. Today, we begin to make things right. As the press conference ended, Julian felt a strange sense of peace. He had risked everything, but gained something he'd never expected. A chance at redemption. Alara turned to him, her voice soft but strong. You did the right thing. My father would have been proud. Mara smiled. This is only the beginning. There are more stories to tell, more wrongs to right. As they walked out into the sunlight, Julian wondered, when faced with the truth, will you have the courage to speak up, or will you let fear keep you silent? The world had changed. Headlines splashed Julian Croft's name across every screen, but for the first time, the story wasn't about a ruthless billionaire or a hostile takeover. It was about justice. It was about courage. It was about a maid who had punched a billionaire to save his life, and what he did next that shocked everyone. Weeks passed as the dust settled. Thorne and his accomplices faced trial, their empire of deceit unraveling in the courts. The city buzzed with talk of reform, of new regulations, of the power one act of bravery could unleash. Julian found himself in unfamiliar territory. Not the boardroom, but a modest office filled with light and laughter. The Vance Croft Foundation was no longer just an idea. It was a living, breathing force for good, offering grants to small businesses, providing legal aid to families targeted by corporate predators, and supporting whistleblowers who dared to speak truth to power. Alara stood at the heart of it all, her name now known far beyond the world of housekeepers and hidden corridors. As executive director, she led with humility and fierce determination. She made sure her father's legacy lived on, not in bitterness, but in hope. Julian worked at her side, learning to listen, to serve, to use his influence for something greater than himself. The old arrogance faded, replaced by a quiet resolve. He knew he could never undo the harm of the past, but he could choose a different future. One afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the foundation's windows, Julian paused beside Alara's desk. She looked up, a smile lighting her face. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The old life, the power, the deals, the spotlight." Julian considered the question. "I thought I would, but I think I was always searching for something real, something that mattered." Alara nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "You found it. We both did." They stepped outside together, the city humming with possibility. Julian looked out over the skyline, remembering the man he'd been. He was changed, by fear, by loss, but most of all, by the courage of someone he'd once overlooked. As they walked forward, Julian realized that true power wasn't about control or conquest. It was about lifting others up, about standing for what's right, about being willing to change, even when it's hard. What would you do if given a second chance? Could you let go of the past to build something better? The story of Julian and Alara became a beacon, inspiring others to speak out, to stand up, to believe that even the smallest act of courage could change the world. If you were given the chance, would you use your power to help others? What does a new beginning look like for you? Share your thoughts below, and thank you for joining this journey of redemption, courage, and hope.